Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we're staying in Ontario with somebody who is an old teammate of one of our recent guests in a little town. He had a great career in high school, finished as a medalist in track in Ontario, also in cross country, also at the Canadian national level. Caught the eye of coaches in a U.S. university, coached by a very famous person we might learn a little bit about today. Then, like so many of the era, went on to marathon and finished in the top 8 at Olympic trials. Welcome on the podcast today, Morrison Reid. Hi, Morrison.
Hi, thanks for talking to me, Matthew.
Let's find out about your background. You were a colleague of Jerry Bouma back in a little town. What was it like growing up there for you, and what was your introduction to sports and competition?
I grew up in a farm community in a little place called Bognor, with the nearest big center is Owen Sound. It was a farming community. My dad was a farmer. My mom was a teacher. And in those days, we went to school in one-room schoolhouses, all grades in the same school. I had the same teacher for 8 years.
Wow.
We started in grade 1 in one side of the school and then gradually moved up to the other side, which was grade 8. So that was the progression. My mother was a teacher in that kind of school, and my dad was a farmer in a sort of a small mixed farm.
What kind of activities was there for phys ed, gym class, and sports? Anything in that first 8 years?
Yeah, there was some community stuff. There was a community fastball league. In those communities, everyone played fastball, windmill pitching. That was the sport. So I played that for a few years. It wasn't great. I didn't have an arm. So that held me back. Played some hockey for a couple of years, started late. There was a community hockey league, so I did get to play hockey.
What month were you born in?
December 1950.
Oh, that's the worst month to be born in for hockey, they say.
That's what they say. So wasn't very good at hockey, mostly rode the pine. So there were two sports that I was able to play in my early years. Then when I went to high school, we had moved out of the small schools into a centralized school in the nearest big town, which was Owen Sound. And that's where I met Jerry. We were in the same grade 9 class. And within a couple of years, I had become involved in running. Wasn't very good at the start, but it gradually got better.
Why'd you get involved with?
I wasn't good at anything else. That's a story of many distance runners, I think. I wasn't very big, actually, so wasn't suited for basketball or football, which were pretty big sports in the high school. So running seemed like something that I could do and be on a team, and became involved in it, and I liked it.
What appealed to you about running when you weren't performing at getting to an elite level?
I think I like the feeling of, it's hard to describe, just the feelings of self-confidence, of doing something, of working hard at something, being with other guys, being part of a team. There are a lot of nice things about running. It's way faster than walking, so you can get places faster. It was a good way to get away from an angry father at times you needed to.
What was it like with your team in terms of the position of running? Now, Jerry Bouma was having pretty great success. What was the status compared to hockey, compared to basketball, of running there?
Oh, it was low status. There wasn't much attention. We were supported by the school. They would send us to meets, and a couple of teachers got involved to help us, but it was pretty low status in terms of recognition.
Yeah, same for me. What about equipment? Did you have running shoes of any recognizable quality or brand at that point?
I remember running in the entry-level Adidas shoes, so for trainers, and the school had some spikes that were sort of part of the equipment cache at the school. Again, they were old model Adidas, but they were available to us for running races. And later on, as I got better, I was able to get some better competition shoes.
And what led to you getting better? Was it just you growing up and having talent? Was it coaching? What was the interaction there? And when did that occur to you that you actually were getting pretty good?
I think there were some lifestyle issues. Growing up on a farm, we walked everywhere. Old people talk about walking 2 miles to school uphill in the snow. We actually did that. It's hard to believe, but basically we walked everywhere to school, around the community, and the farm chores. You know, Jerry and I joked that we had gone to the shoveling shit, throwing hay bale training camp before we got involved in running. So we were pretty fit people. And then add to that running and some more sophisticated training, and it meshed because you had this base of strength from a very vigorous lifestyle. Add to that some specific training, some mileage, some intervals, some training with purpose. And that provided results, at least for me.
Yeah.
And I think for Jerry as well.
Yeah. What about the early successes? What was about the competition for you and achievements? Do you remember any early ones that were significant that kind of were milestones or leaps of how you thought about running?
Yeah, I mean, there were some school records that weren't very fast, but one of my early memories was I'd focused on the half-mile record, the school record, which was around 2 minutes, 20 seconds. So not very fast by high school standards. So I thought, maybe I can break that. So I started training with the goal of breaking that school record of 2:20 in the high school track meet, and did that in my grade 10 year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He ran 2:18. So that was a success for me because I'd set a goal and had done some specific training. I'd figured out how fast do I have to run around the track to meet that goal. And I set about doing that by running some repeat intervals with a dirt track. It was a 440 track.
Right.
And also had measured out a distance on our farm lane. It was 440. So I was using that as well to see how fast I needed to go to break that record. So then I broke the record.
That dirt track, did it have any cinders? What was it like when it rained?
One end would have a huge puddle on it when it rained, and the gravel would wash off and there'd be clay underneath. So it was slippery and muddy, but overall it drained fairly well.
Yeah.
I would say, except for that one end that I recall that would pool up with water when in a heavy rain. But otherwise it was pretty good.
Did you host meets there, or did you break the school record on that track? I'm sure you ran faster eventually there.
Yeah, we would have a sort of internal, like a house league track meet every year. So that's where I broke that record. I think we did host a regional meet once in high school. The regional meets tended to float around to other high schools. There were 2 high schools in this town. It was about 20,000 people. The other school ran on a half-mile horse track, which was interesting.
We had one of those where I went to school. I occasionally did. It was tough to run intervals on the judge. Yeah. It's a weird, when you're used to 400s. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like it took forever to get around it.
What did you know about the OFSA, the Ontario Championships, there at the beginning of 10? Did you know the bigger world, what was going to be available to compete at if you were successful?
Yeah, I did. We were lucky. There was a person in the school, his name was Larry Wolf. He was a pole vaulter, actually. He was a world-class pole vaulter, interestingly enough, from the small school in Northern Ontario, and ended up on scholarship to the University of Michigan, pole vaulting. So through him, I became aware that, there was OFSA out there. There were Canadian championships. There was a path to scholarships in the U.S. down the road because of his example.
After you broke the school half-mile record, when was the next goal? What came to you next to pursue?
I think the next goal was to break every record in my age class at the school, which I did the next year. They were soft records. They weren't hard to break. Once a person got reasonably fit, a mile record wasn't even under 5 minutes. So once I started getting fit and doing some training with goals and purpose, those records came down, were pretty easy to beat. So I didn't have any trouble with that. So that happened. And then really my goal was just to get better and see how far that would take me. And that translated into more success as I got older and trained harder.
When was your first podium, top 5, top 3 in an Ontario level meet? Was it in track or cross country?
It would have been in track.
Okay.
The cross country medals didn't happen until my grade 13 year. In my grade 12 year, I never made it to OFSA in the high school championships, but I had won the gold at the club junior and provincial championships the previous summer. So I was getting better quite quickly.
And that was 3K?
5K.
5K, okay.
Yeah, the club championships for my age range. By the time I was in grade 12, I was considered a junior, and juniors were running 5 kilometers in club championships.
What about the competition you had, say, cross country in your grade 13 year? Did you know about the other runners, or what your expectations at that final?
Well, for sure. I had been progressively running against these people, and they were very good and had been very good for quite some time. I for a long time, wasn't even coming close to them. In fact, I think one of the best runners in the province, his name was Jim Slavin, and he'd been good for a long time. And there was another young guy from North Bay, Jack Dufresne, who'd been good for some time. So these guys were pretty much dominating. And I was aware of that even from the time I started running in high school. So they were the people for me to run again. I didn't qualify for the provincials high school championships until my final year in track, because you had to work through regionals, and then you had to work through a bigger regional, and the top 2 would move on. But it wasn't easy to get to OFSA, actually, which the high school championships.
Canada then had 13 years and education up through grade 13. When you were the pole vaulter getting a scholarship to a major university in the U.S., when did you think that this was something you could do after high school and possibly help you with that idea of getting to college?
Yeah, I think my grade 12 year, I would say, I thought that was definitely going to be a possibility if I kept getting better the way I was getting better.
And how did that work? Who pursued who? Did you get help? Did people contact you? How did you end up at Iowa?
Well, interestingly enough, there was a book in the library. We didn't have a lot of access to resources, no internet or social media. So there was a book in the library, and had chapters from prominent coaches in the U.S. Francis Kretzmeyer in Iowa was one of them. He'd written a chapter. Bob Timmons from Kansas had written a chapter. I wrote to both of them to say, this is what I've been doing. This is what I'd like to do. I'm interested in going to your school. And they both wrote back.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's how that happened.
Tell me, go through the process of then. You pursued 2, you heard back, and then how did it eventually end up that you went there?
I think what happened is I ended up running really well my grade 13 year. Better than I even thought that it was possible for me. I was 3rd in the Canadian juniors. That was the fall of my grade 13 year. And the 2 people that finished ahead of me were already freshmen at the University of Oregon. And I think it was 10 seconds off winning. So that sort of was a breakthrough race for me. And that year I was 3rd at the provincial cross country championships as well. So had done well on cross country, and that started getting me some attention. And I started getting calls from other coaches the coach at Dartmouth College had called me around Christmas to say they were interested. And so, quite frankly, I didn't have we were in a very rural area, not too exposed to the world. And I had no idea that Dartmouth was the Ivy League and a big place to go to.
Right.
So I don't think I ever pursued that too hard. After cross country, continued to run well, did some indoor races. They weren't particularly great, but had some good races in the spring and ended up taking the silver at OFSA. And it was a great race. I lost that race by 0.2 of a second. The winner was 8:35.5. I was 8:35.7. So it was almost a photo finish. And that started getting me quite a bit more attention.
By then, you'd got a lot of experience in races, close races. What style runner are you? Front runner, kicker, strategic, tactics? What was your general approach by then?
Basically, my goal, my strategy was to run as fast as I could, as far as I could. So I would say I was a front runner. I always was at the front, either leading or trying to lead. So that's basically how I ran. By the time I was in grade 13, there was no local competition. So I was always leading and winning by a long way. So if I had a strategy, I would say that's what it was. Go as hard as you can, as long as you can, and see what happens. So there's not a lot of purpose to it, right?
That's not uncommon in the smaller areas till we reach these big meets. Now, I just want to ask you then, you've chosen a profession, society, you're working now in social work.
Yeah. I'm a private in social work.
Yeah, you're a considered person. What about competition and what about losing a race by 0.2 of a second? How competitive were you when you stepped onto the track and how did you handle second place, which is a great accomplishment, but not first?
Yeah, I was happy with that because it was such a progression for me from where I'd started to be at that point and even to finish second or third to be near the top. I was always very happy with that. I suppose it would have, maybe that's why I didn't win more races because I just didn't want to take it that one step further. I don't know, but I never was really upset if I finished well and finished and with a good time. So I was happy with that.
So what year was grade 13 spring when you were going to then go to Iowa? And did you do a campus visit? Did you sign a letter of intent? How did the process go to say, okay, I'm set and I'm moving to Iowa?
It was interesting because of that, after that high school race, I was getting quite a bit of attention from other schools as well. And Iowa had offered me a full ride. Kratz, we call him Coach Kratzmeyer, had offered me a full ride at Iowa. And that was really the first offer. But I was looking at other places. Michigan, I was set to go on a campus visit to Michigan with the pole vaulter was there and was recruiting me to go there along with the coaches. And I was set to do a campus visit. Some of the other schools who were talking to me were Ohio State and Texas at Austin. So about 3 weeks after the high school race, I broke my leg. I was in the summer, my family had sold our farm. We moved into, we called it the city. It was just really a small town. And I had joined the summer militia program going, an Army program for students where you could go and march around and earn a little bit of money. So I joined that. And for recreation, we were playing a game of floor hockey. And some kid on the other team two-handed me across the leg and broke my femur.
Loud crack?
Loud crack. Yeah, the bone was displaced. It was really painful. So that happened. Iowa was the only school that stood with me. And I called the other schools and they weren't saying no, but one school would say, why don't you wait till Christmas and see how it heals, that kind of thing. And when I called Kratz at Iowa, he said, we wanted you to come down anyway. So I went down there with a broken leg. I had a cast on for 3 months.
So no training all summer?
No training at all, although I used to go over to the track on crutches and do laps on crutches. Perfect. And develop
On
this.
a dirt track in your white cast. Okay, yeah.
That's right. Develop this great upper body from doing that, I guess.
Let's talk about Iowa then. So this is 1970?
Yeah, I went there in the fall of 1970. Yeah.
Okay, 1970, the Big Ten, to people who grew up in the States, Big Ten football, it was 10 colleges. It was very competitive. And also in virtually every sport, big colleges. In the running world, a lot of famous runners from Michigan. Was Herb Lindsay there then or not from Michigan?
Yeah, he wasn't there when I started. I think Herb was a freshman the year I left.
Okay. But some of the other guys, Bjorkland and Craig Burgeon. So you were in the company of definitely national class people in the Big Ten races.
Yeah, almost every race you ran in, there'd be someone who either had been, would be, or was on the U.S. Olympic team.
Yeah. And freshman year, you had to get in shape after that broken leg, but were you freshmen eligible to compete? How did that work then?
I think that was the first year that freshmen were eligible to compete. So I wasn't able to compete in the fall in cross country, but ran some track races indoor. I was competing in indoor track in January of 71. Didn't particularly do well because I wasn't very fit. And then also competed outdoors. Did well enough to earn a varsity letter that year.
And where did you find your place in events? Because in high school, from starting at that half mile and running 5K early, where did you settle mainly? And what was the distance for most of the meets at Iowa in cross country?
The distance was anywhere from 4 miles to 6 miles. So more often than not, it was the Big Ten championships would be 6 miles. Later on, when it moved into metric, 10,000 meters.
You ran in the Big Ten championships for your subsequent 3 years there.
Yeah.
And you all Big Ten, I think all 3 years. So how many did they recognize? Did they take top 20 and call them all Big Ten?
I'm just trying to remember that there were medals for the top 15.
15. Okay. So how many medals did you get? 2?
2.
3?
Yeah.
2? Yeah. And where were you starting as a sophomore where were you on the team? What finisher for Iowa were you at those championships?
I was the second guy.
Okay. Yeah. How'd you get along with the coach? What was your relationship to your first coach there at Iowa? How'd that work?
Oh, it was very good. Coach Kretzmeyer, we called him Kretz, he was strict but easy to get along with. Tended to be aloof. He wouldn't talk to the coach much. They show up with a stopwatch at workouts, but he was available to talk to if you were worried about something. So we had a good relationship. He was very fair. And just going back to he was the kind of guy that kid calls from Canada, sorry, coach, I broke my leg. I don't know what's going to happen. And he says, come on down anyway. That tells you a lot about his character and who he was as a man, as well as a coach. Someone who stuck by his word.
Yeah. And you sound like you were pretty self-motivated through high school, measuring out on your own property, setting goals. What was the mileage change and the equipment change and the facilities change? How'd you take all that in when you got to Iowa?
It wasn't very much different, actually, because in high school, Jerry, my teammate, and I had learned about intervals, and we ran a lot of intervals, and I ran a lot of fartlek on the country roads. And Kretz coached in a similar way. It was an interval-based program, so the team would run intervals 3 times a week, and then a longer run once a week and some easy running in between. And that was pretty much the philosophy, which was pretty similar to what I'd been doing in high school. It wasn't high mileage at all.
And on the track, what were most of your races? What distance were you running? Multiple events, or did you concentrate on 3 5K?
Yeah, it was the 3 mile 5K.
Yeah.
The Big Ten didn't start running the 6 mile or 10K until 74, my last year. And I ran it that year.
What about goals you set there? I wanted to ask you about travel and how far afield you got, if you remember any travel outside the Big Ten schools. So what was the geography of the Big Ten for people who aren't familiar? But what else was your personal goal setting? Was that part with the coach? Were you doing something more than I want to get better?
I think I, number one, wanted to get better, but I trusted in the coaches and I followed their program, did what they asked me to do, which again led to some progression. Throughout the 4 years, I did get better, followed the program. Occasionally, I would run extra. My final year at Iowa, and that was my best college year, I started doing more long runs, which seemed to help me a lot, just in terms of competition. So that was something. At that point, coaching had changed, and Ted Wheeler was the coach. Kretzmeyer was the head coach, and Ted Wheeler had taken over the cross-country and distance guys. So I sat down with Ted and said, Ted, I just really feel I need to do some more long running to develop a little bit more strength. And he was good with that.
Yeah.
So once a week, I started running long runs, actually 15 miles on one long run. And the rest of the time, it was the shorter intervals. Wow.
Were you doing those by yourself, or did you have people along with you doing those too?
No, I was doing that by myself. No one else wanted to do that.
Let's talk about Ted Wheeler. Quite an amazing story and accomplishment, barrier breaker himself. Do you know how the coaching change took place at Iowa? And yeah, what's the background of Ted Wheeler?
Ted ran at Iowa.
Ah,
And along with another great black distance runner, Deacon Jones, who was a great steeplechaser, American steeplechaser. They both ran at Iowa under Kretzmeyer. So
Kretzmeyer was Ted's coach.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Ted had maintained his relationship with Kretz and was recruiting for him. Ted was in Chicago and was doing some coaching there and some recruiting, and had a natural connection with Kretz, who was starting to wind down his career as a coach and looking to mentor someone. And Ted filled that gap. So he came in my junior year and coached me the last 3 years I was there. Ted, in and of himself, is a great story. I think the first African-American 1,500 meter runner to compete in the Olympics
For the
West. Yeah. He
56. So he went down to Australia. Yeah.
and Deacon Jones as well was on the Olympic team, and they both were at Iowa and coached by Kretzmeyer.
Wow.
So Kretz was the coach who mentored these great black distance runners in pretty much a white university in a white state.
Yeah. Wow.
There took them.
Well, okay, so yeah, we don't have to get into the whole trying to analyze the whole civil rights and nature of things, but the Midwest of the U.S. is a more homogeneous thing, like you said, the campus of that. How far afield did you guys travel throughout your career? What was the Big Ten, cross country, and the dual meets and the track meets? Where all did you go?
I think I went to every school. So there was a lot of travel. The Michigan schools, that was an 8-hour, maybe not quite 8, 6 to 7 hour ride. And we drove them usually in Suburbans.
Yeah.
Big old Suburbans. That would be the convoy. We didn't take buses. It was always Suburbans. Michigan would have been the longest travel.
Right.
And then, of course, if you qualified for NCAAs, you'd go wherever they were. And I never did. Just never got fast enough to qualify. Came close in cross country, but we didn't have a strong team. So as an individual, never quite made it. Like in the Big Ten, you had to finish in the top 10 to make it on to the NCAA. And I was fairly close, but never made it. The other thing, we always had a spring trip to Arizona. So they'd fly us, the spring sports, down to Tucson. And we trained down there for March break, and that was fun.
Yeah. Great. Had everything moved to better surface tracks then? What did you have?
The first year I was there, Iowa had just transitioned from a indoor dirt track 200-meter indoor dirt track to a composite track in a new building. So that was my experience. Some of the other schools were still running on dirt tracks, 200-meter dirt tracks. Minnesota's, while I was at Iowa, even in my last year as a senior, was on a 200-meter dirt track in their field house.
Right.
But most of the schools had gone to composite tracks.
And what did you think, if you were looking at times, what difference was there when you stepped onto a composite track? How much would you expect your time to change? Did you notice a measurable or specific change?
I don't think so. I think actually the dirt tracks were quite fast. They'd pack them down and water them down. And I don't think in the early composite tracks, I don't think there was much difference. They weren't banked. They were flat, no bank corners, right?
Yeah.
And they were quite hard. And I think resulted in a lot of injuries. The guys at Iowa, everyone was always injured.
Was it shin splints or what other kind of things? What did you have?
Connective tissue issues, stress fractures. Didn't really happen to me. I was fairly lucky. Didn't get injured until my final year when it was actually the Big Ten final, the 3 mile, and I got tripped and fell and broke my arm and knocked out of the race. Yes. So I'd be lucky with broken bone.
Yeah, I mean, farm guys usually don't break, but it happens. Yeah.
By the time I hit grade 1, I'd had 2 broken legs, actually, from farm accidents. So maybe I had fragile bones. I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife talks about that.
How was your academic experience? What did you study and what size campus was Iowa? What were the adjustment pains or discoveries you made about yourself through that 4 years?
Iowa was a really good fit for me. After I got over the homesickness that almost everyone goes through, moving from a small place in Ontario to Iowa, it was a really good fit because Iowa's a rural state. And I felt immediately at home in Iowa, just in terms of the culture and the people and the friendliness. So that worked out really well for me. And Iowa at the time was one of the smaller universities in the Big Ten. I think about 20,000 students, but still quite big.
Right.
But academically was a good experience for me. Managed to graduate. Wasn't too sure what I was going to do, but leaned towards human services. Had taken psychology courses and social work courses. So I was able to declare a major in social work in my final year because I had enough of the right courses. So declared a major in social work and graduated with a BA in social work from Iowa.
All right. I'm talking to, if we look at Jerry Boma's story, he had a year of eligibility left and he returned to Canada. You went a different way. What was going on in your life when you graduated there? And what did you think about running? Let's talk about your first marathon, your very first marathon after you graduated.
Yeah, I came back to Ontario and got a job in social work pretty quickly at a children's mental health center in London, which is where I live now. And I walked away from the sport for a while. I was tired. It had been pretty intense, lots of competition, lots of training. So I just took a break, got a job, went to work, and then started running and got married. I met Rosine at Iowa. She was an Iowa girl from Burlington, Iowa. And she came to Canada and we got married. In February, we've been married 50 years and have 3 kids.
Congratulations. Wow.
So that was a long-lasting relationship. So I picked up running again the year after I graduated, after taking a break for a few months, and just gradually got back into it in London and started training with some good runners again. I trained once in a while with a runner, Grant McLaren, who was a really great Canadian distance runner. Be a great interview for you. Grant almost made the finals in the 5,000 meters in Montreal in 76. There was controversy. He was one of the last guys in and then was out and then stopped running, but he ran in the low 13s for 5,000 meters.
What was the controversy exactly?
There was a push, I think, as I recall, there was an East German runner. There was a push. Something happened in the race. There was a protest, and I think, and that maybe I'm wrong, but I think Grant was put in the final and then put out again, like a counter protest. But he was so good. He won a lot of races on the board tracks, like the Melrose Games, races like that in New York City. Was running 2 miles in the 8:20s back in the 70s.
So
You came on Sundays, and another runner who was a good Canadian steeplechaser, Joe Sachs, and just gradually started getting fit again. Because if you ran with Grant McLaren, you weren't fooling around. So
what'd your mileage go to then?
it wasn't very much. It was probably about 100 kilometers a week, 60 miles a week, 60, 70 miles a week. Again, but I would say pretty intense mileage. As I got fit again, the runs were pretty hard, particularly the Sunday runs. Grant's philosophy of life was if he'd been running for an hour, he wanted to be close to home. So the hour run was pretty hard. So it didn't have heavy mileage, and decided to run the Olympic trials just for fun. Really had no expectations at all of doing anything surprising. It ended up running pretty well around 2:22, and that was my first marathon.
What was that course like? I was in Ottawa, and it was spring 76.
Yeah, spring of 76, yeah.
Do you remember anything about the course? Hilly, flat? I don't know what they used.
I remember it being fairly flat for most of it along the canal. A lot of
Right,
it was out and back along the canal. But then the final section came up around the Parliament buildings, and there's quite a significant long hill right around the Parliament buildings there. And then it finished on the Carlton track. So it wasn't a real challenging course, but it was hilly at the end when you're really starting to feel it.
I think you outperformed going in with no expectations. You certainly did well. And what happened then? You decide to stay with the marathon and do some more after that good result, I think.
Yeah, I thought I had a future in the race. I thought that was a good start, and maybe that was going to be my event. It pretty much turned out to be. That's where I had my most success, was at the marathon. A few months after that, my wife, she's a speech therapist, was looking around for grad schools to go to, and decided that University of Florida would be a good fit. And I liked that because that was the home of the Florida Track Club. Frank Schindler, Jen Batchelor, Marty LaCroix were there. So we packed up our Super Beetle, our Volkswagen Super Beetle, with all our stuff. She was accepted at Gainesville at University of Florida in their master's program. And we moved.
Didn't have to take your winter Parkers.
No. Yeah, so I left my job and moved down there and started running with the Florida Track Club. Yeah, Frank Shaw was there.
Who were you actually training with? Who was training then with you on some of these runs?
Yeah, Frank Shorter and Jack Batcho had left. They'd gone to Boulder to train at altitude. But Marty LaCroix was there. So Barry Brown, who was top-notch U.S. distance runner, was there. Quite a few other really good runners. Byron Dice, sub 4-minute miler. And I mostly trained with these guys on Sundays. There'd always be a long run, often at Marty's house. There was a trail that went back through the Florida bush on dirt roads that we ran on 20 miles on Sundays. A fairly easy run, no competition, just to get the miles in.
Yeah, a lot of people. Were you changing from McLaren's get home in an hour and was this conversational, long, slow distance type stuff?
Yeah, it was. We talked. It was conversational, long, slow distance. But looking back, it wasn't that slow because everyone's pretty fast. So, you 7-minute miles, 3-hour marathon pace.
Yeah.
Which was long, slow distance. For Alan.
What about your racing? How much racing did you do during your time there living in Gainesville?
Ran in some races, ran the Florida Relays. I was only there for a year. Ran a marathon in Melbourne, Florida ran 221 there and came second to a Canadian, actually, who ran 220.
Ah, nice.
Fairly close race. That time, and then I went to Boston in 77, which was to be a big goal race for me. And my time gave me a pretty good seed in the race. And at that time, Boston was big to us. When I ran in 77, there were 3,000 runners there. And I thought that was insanely large.
Yeah. Let me interrupt there and say, what were, let's say Melbourne, even Boston in 77, what were the timing signals, the water, the shoes? What was going on there in the world of marathoning in terms of support, horse support, and your shoes and things like that? What had changed?
Shoes were getting a little better. I actually had a sponsorship from Nike, and they were giving me shoes, and some of the shoes behind you, I think I ran in those shoes, actually. Waffle trainers. So I was wearing Nikes. And they were getting better, but not much cushioning. They were getting lighter, but not much cushioning. The trainers were getting better every year. There seemed to be better shoes available for us. In racing, literally, there was no water unless you had your own personal crew, which I didn't. There wasn't anything. So I don't recall until maybe my last marathon, I don't recall drinking at all during a marathon.
Certainly no food. Yeah, no fuel. Yeah.
No fuel, no electrolytes, no hydration.
Yeah.
So that was coming along.
Were you wristwatch pacing? Were on every 5 mile mark or something on most of these kind of races? How was that working then?
I wasn't doing that. There were basically no mile markers that I recall, or no markers to tell you how fast you were going at what point in time. So you basically just ran without any kind of feedback of how fast you were going. Again, unless you had a personal crew with you. And some of the really elite guys would have had that. But otherwise, for most people, there was very little support along the course in terms of water, nutrition, anything like that. Yeah, I really didn't know what time I would have until I finished.
How'd Boston go for you in 77?
Pretty badly. It was a hot day. 77 was a hot day. And I ran hard for the first half and was placed pretty high. And then the wheels just came completely off. I ended up finishing, jogged it in. Once I could not maintain the pace and was really hurting, jogged it into the finish. There was no other way to get back to downtown Boston than to run it in. And I didn't even cross the finish line. I was so disappointed in what had happened. I just stepped off and didn't even get a time. So that was a pretty disappointing day for me. But it was hot. There's no water. That year in Boston was, I think, a pivotal point in courses, right? Because Jerome Drayton, the great Canadian runner, won. And he expressed his disappointment after the race that there'd be no water at all along the course for him, unless you could get it from a spectator or somewhere else. And that seemed to change things for course management and course directors. People started doing better, and I think Boston started doing better after that race.
And what brought your year at Gainesville to an end was the end of your wife's studies?
No, she continued. I wasn't that happy in Gainesville. I think, really looking back, the disappointment of Boston, which shouldn't have been a thing, really. It really shouldn't have been a thing. But I built up for that. And I was having trouble finding work in my field, in social work, and just decided to go back to Canada and work in Canada, got a social work job. And I went back, and Rosine stayed in Gainesville and finished her degree. It took her another year. And we had sort of a long distance relationship. And I went back to actually my home community, Owen Sound, and worked there in child welfare. She finished her master's degree at Gainesville.
Okay, so in the 70s, what was the world of child welfare? What were you doing? And what were the issues and what were you hoping to accomplish when you went to work every week?
You were protecting children from difficult family situations, from child neglect and physical abuse is what we were doing. We would investigate and then make decisions, basically try to support the family to help them do better, to ensure that the children would be safe. Occasionally, we would remove children from really bad homes where there didn't seem to be any hope that people could do better. So very similar to today, really. So there would be a foster care system where children would go if they couldn't live at home, or would go often for a short period of time and then be returned to their family.
How stressful was that for you? You seem like still a considerate, calm guy and well balanced. How stressful was that work then and as you stayed in this career?
It was stressful. I think it depended on what kind of support you had from the people around you, what kind of supervision, what was the management like at the agency. I think over the years, I've been fortunate and have worked for good people, for good programs. So the work would be stressful, but you had people to support you. And I was still running when I was doing child welfare. So running was a great outlet. And I was still running marathons and still trying to compete at a fairly high level. I think by that time, I had realized that my goals maybe needed to be a little bit more modest, and I was just going to enjoy running and do as well as I could, give up the goal of trying to be the best in the world or whatever that meant, or trying to be like Frank Shorter or Jerome Drayton or compete with them. That at some point you realize you're not going to do that.
Yeah, it was a different world then for runners. You had a full-time job. And yeah, that's a big impact on the ability to train, and the world has changed. What about that sponsorship with Nike? How did that come to an end? It was just an equipment sponsorship, right?
Yeah, they gave me equipment and shoes. And I wore their stuff. They supported me right till I decided to stop high-level competition. So even when I returned to Canada, I was getting shoes and equipment through them. Jeff Hollister was the person I related to from Nike, and he was a wonderful guy, very supportive. They continued to help me out until through my last marathon, which was, I ran the Bermuda Marathon in, I think, 78 and did well there, actually, surprisingly. They paid my way out and billeted me, and it was a very good race. So I finished sixth in that race.
Do you remember who else was there in that race? Anybody would recognize?
Yeah, Ian Thompson
Okay.
was there. He was the Commonwealth Games champion, 210 marathon guy. So it was an interesting race. If you've ever gone to Bermuda, there's not a flat place. There's no flat section. So it was a very hilly course. And it was windy that day. So Ian Thompson was there. Andy Holden from Great Britain, who was a pretty good runner. Not as well known as Ian Thompson was, I don't think.
Attracted Commonwealth runners because of its status. Yeah, I guess. One thing is, what then after you decide to quit trying to compete at the highest level? What happened with you in running, and what's become of your fitness? And you enjoyed running from the beginning. So how'd that continue for you?
Yeah, I kept running fairly well and at a pretty good level until I had my first child. And then that was when I really started focusing more on career and family, and just continued to run for fun and didn't compete very much. And then got to the point, had another child. We've had three. Second child came along and I quit running completely, really for about 10 years. Gained a lot of weight, actually, which I wasn't very happy with. But it was a busy time with work and career and family. And then got back into running, started running again after about 10 years, lost the weight and started really enjoying again. Did some masters running and ran right up until I was running fairly well for an old person right up until I was 65. And then I had knee trouble, arthritis in both knees. And one of my last races as a master was with Jerry. We ran a local half marathon together, just as a
Right.
project, right? As a sort of a reunion with Jerry Boma. And I think we both ran close to an hour and 50 minutes for a half, which isn't bad for people in their 60s. There's lots
Yeah.
of people in their 60s faster, right? But it wasn't bad.
Yeah, nice. What connection, and had you gone back to Iowa, kept in touch with any of those people or the coach?
Yeah, I was going back fairly regularly. There was a meet a couple of times. The Big Ten was at Iowa. I went back both times to reconnect with people. And we're going back maybe once a year. Sometimes tried to catch a football game when I was there and maintain a connection mostly with Ched Wheeler through phone calls and emails, that kind of thing, and would see him every time I was there. And he passed away, I think, a couple of years ago.
Just a couple of years ago. Yeah, 23 maybe. Yeah.
And I was there the summer before last for a celebration of life where people got together just to remember him. So I maintain a connection with Iowa and try to go back. One of my bucket lists is to go back and experience the Iowa Wave. That's one of the best traditions in college football. It's called the Iowa Wave. The Children's Hospital, they built a new hospital there that overlooks the football stadium. And at the end of every first quarter, the entire stadium, all the spectators, the players, the coaches turn around and wave at the kids. And there's some really sick kids in the hospital that are in the top floor looking down onto the stadium. So there's 80,000 fans in the stadium waving to these children in the Children's Hospital. It's a really cool tradition. And so maybe next fall, one of my bucket lists is to go there and participate in the Iowa Wave. Google it sometime. It'll make you cry.
Maybe more of us can add that to our bucket list and get out there. That's great. It's been great. It's been great talking to you, Morrison. I initially found your name from a poem that you wrote that was in one of Jerry Boma's non-running books, and you've written a few poems about running. I don't know what else you've written, but we have a couple poems of yours on running.
Yeah, I just fool around with doing some writing. Jerry's quite an established writer, as in writes poetry frequently. So once in a while, I'll write one and share it with him. And that's how that one got in the book. And I was reminiscing about running feelings and what I missed about running. I think that's the one you've seen, right?
Yeah, good. They get the essence pretty quick. They're short, but yeah, for me, even, I don't know if you have it there. I'll just post it with the podcast episode so people can read them, a couple that you've written. But they get to the essence and bring back memories of the gun and the people and the focus that comes. It's been great talking to you, Morris. Is there anybody else or anything else you want to mention? It's been really nice talking to you.
I don't think so, other than you asked me if I still am connected to running. I am running again. I've had both knees replaced. So I was surprised that I was able to run again after having that. The last one was about this time last year. So I'm able to run about 5 kilometers a day now. And actually last fall, my goal when I came out of surgery was to run in the Canadian Masters Cross Country Championships, which were in London, our hometown. So I did that in the fall. Didn't finish.
I think I saw your name on the list. Are you 70 years old?
74.
Okay. Oh, you were in the 70 to 74 category. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm having fun again with running, just trying to get out. As Jerry says, I think this is one of Barry's sayings. You're half as fast and it's twice as hard. It still feels the same. It's still quicker than walking.
You've had several long breaks and a family and a career, and it's about 60 years of running for you.
Pretty much.
All right. Thanks for all your time, Morrison. It's been great talking to you. And
You're welcome. Thanks for welcoming to me.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes, and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.